A desperate scream echoed through the cramped corridors of the alien mothership as Kaid, a hardened Hirogen warrior, thrashed violently on the infirmary bed. His muscular frame convulsed uncontrollably, vital signs plummeting, sending the ship's medical staff into a frenzy. Just minutes ago, Kaid had been eagerly sampling Earth cuisine with his human guide, Lieutenant Edward Cook, part of a critical diplomatic mission to cement the fragile peace between their species. But one bite of a supreme pizza slice had unleashed an explosion of flavor that Kaid's alien physiology couldn't handle, plunging him into a life-threatening state of sensory overload. As human doctors and Hirogen medics worked frantically to stabilize Kaid, news of the incident spread like wildfire. Hardline factions within the Hirogen leadership seized on Kaid's reaction as proof that peace with a species whose mere food could fell a warrior was a fool's errand. They clamored for an immediate end to the negotiations and a return to the bloody conflicts of the past. Aboard the mothership, Lieutenant Cook refused to leave Kaid's side as he lay comatose, his life hanging by a thread. Cook knew the future of both their species hinged on Kaid's survival. If the Hirogen soldier died, war would be inevitable. But if Kaid could be saved, if he could learn to embrace the wonders of human cuisine, it might just open the door to a new era of cooperation and understanding. With tensions rising and time running out, Cook vowed to do whatever it took to help his unlikely friend recover and show the galaxy the true power of a slice of pepperoni pizza. As Kaid slowly regained consciousness in the hospital bed, his mind swam with fragmented memories of the intense flavors that had overwhelmed his senses. The pungent aroma of pepperoni, the creamy texture of melted cheese, the tangy sweetness of tomato sauce, each element danced tantalizingly through his thoughts, both enticing and terrifying in its unfamiliarity. Lieutenant Cook, who had maintained a constant vigil at Kaid's bedside, noticed the Hirogen's eyes flutter open. He leaned forward, his voice soft with concern. "Kaid, how are you feeling?" Kaid's gaze locked onto Cook, his expression a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "The food," he rasped, his throat dry from disuse. "I must understand it." Cook's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he nodded slowly. "Of course. We'll start slow, with simple dishes that won't overwhelm you." Over the next few days, Cook worked closely with the hospital's culinary staff to introduce Kaid to a carefully curated selection of mild human fare. Plain rice, steamed vegetables, and simple broths formed the foundation of Kaid's new diet, each bite approached with a warrior's caution and a growing sense of excitement. As Kaid's strength returned, so too did his fascination with the incredible diversity of human cuisine. He spent hours in the hospital kitchen, watching the cooks work and asking endless questions about ingredients, techniques, and the cultural significance behind each dish. The staff, initially wary of the imposing alien, soon warmed to his genuine enthusiasm, sharing their own favorite recipes and food-related stories. Inspired by his experiences, Kaid approached Cook with an idea. "I want to share this with my people," he said, his eyes shining with perseverance. "I want to show them the wonders of human food." Together, they set up a makeshift recording studio in Kaid's hospital room, using Cook's technical expertise to create a series of video logs documenting Kaid's culinary journey. Kaid's natural charisma and genuine wonder at each new flavor quickly endeared him to both human and Hirogen viewers alike. As Kaid's videos gained traction across the galaxy, they caught the attention of intergalactic media outlets, who began featuring his content on their platforms. Earth ingredients and recipes became highly sought after, with enterprising merchants and chefs scrambling to meet the sudden demand. However, not everyone welcomed Kaid's success. Some Hirogen factions viewed his actions as a betrayal of their warrior culture, arguing that his focus on food and diplomacy weakened the strength and purity of their way of life. As Kaid's influence grew, so too did the opposition, with rival clans and other alien races beginning to view Earth's culinary dominance as a threat. Kaid, caught between his newfound passion and the growing unrest among his people, knew that he faced a difficult choice. He could abandon his culinary crusade and return to the warrior's path, or he could stand firm in his belief that food had the power to unite even the most disparate of species. With tensions rising and the fate of interspecies relations hanging in the balance, Kaid knew that his next steps would be crucial, not just for himself, but for the entire galaxy. As the demand for Earth cuisine soared across the galaxy, Kaid found himself at the epicenter of a growing crisis. The once humble Hirogen warrior, now an unexpected culinary ambassador, watched in dismay as his well-intentioned video channel sparked a frenzy of intergalactic trade that threatened to upset the delicate balance of power among the stars. In the bustling corridors of the Galactic Trade Council headquarters, Counselor Zorgax strode confidently, his robes billowing behind him as he navigated the throngs of diplomats and merchants. The Zargothian's eyes gleamed with a shrewd calculation, his mind whirring with the possibilities presented by the sudden surge in Earth food exports. Zorgax's agents worked tirelessly, securing vast quantities of human ingredients and recipes, stockpiling them in secret facilities scattered across the galaxy. As the Counselor's hordes grew, the supply lines to other species began to dwindle, sparking a wave of unrest that rippled through the interstellar community. On Earth, governments scrambled to adapt to the new reality of their planet's culinary dominance. In the halls of power, heated debates raged over how to balance the economic boon of increased exports with the growing concerns of domestic shortages and price spikes. The delicate dance of diplomacy and commerce teetered on a knife's edge, threatening to plunge the world into chaos. Amidst the turmoil, Kaid grappled with the unintended consequences of his actions. The Hirogen's heartfelt desire to share the joys of human cuisine had inadvertently sown the seeds of discord, as factions across the galaxy sought to weaponize his videos for their own agendas. With Lieutenant Cook by his side, Kaid delved deeper into the murky undercurrents of the Earth food trade. The unlikely duo, united by their shared passion for culinary diplomacy, began to unravel a web of deceit and manipulation that threatened to engulf the entire galaxy. As they navigated the treacherous landscape of interspecies politics, Kaid and Cook found themselves drawn into a dangerous game of cat and mouse, pitting their wits against the machinations of Counselor Zorgax and his allies. The stakes had never been higher, with the fate of not just Earth's cuisine, but the very fabric of galactic peace hanging in the balance. In dimly lit back rooms and shadowy alleyways, whispered conversations and clandestine meetings became the order of the day. Kaid and Cook, once the public faces of a movement, now found themselves thrust into the role of reluctant spies, gathering intelligence and forging alliances with those who shared their vision of a galaxy united by the power of food. As tensions mounted and the specter of conflict loomed ever closer, Kaid knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. But with the support of his human friend and a growing network of interspecies allies, the Hirogen warrior remained determined to see his mission through to the end, at any expense. The Galactic Trade Council's emergency session on Nexus Prime loomed before Kaid and Lieutenant Cook as they stepped off their transport. The gleaming spires of the Council headquarters pierced the alien sky, a testament to the unity the galaxy strived for but struggled to maintain. Kaid, now widely known by his human-given nickname Zaxthar, felt the weight of expectation settle on his broad shoulders. As they approached the council chambers, the din of heated arguments reached their ears. "Ready for this?" Cook asked, his hand resting briefly on Zaxthar's arm. The Hirogen nodded, his expression set with dedication. "For the sake of both our peoples, I must be." They entered the chambers to a cacophony of raised voices and accusatory gestures. Representatives from dozens of species crowded the circular room, their faces contorted with anger and frustration. Zaxthar took his place at the central podium, his imposing figure drawing all eyes. He began to speak, his voice carrying the passion of his newfound culinary calling. "Esteemed members of the council, I stand before you not as a Hirogen warrior, but as a being who has discovered the unifying power of food. Human cuisine has opened my eyes to new possibilities, new connections between our species. We must not let fear and greed divide us." His words, heartfelt and sincere, seemed to fall on deaf ears. The chamber erupted into chaos, with various factions hurling accusations of hoarding and economic sabotage. Amidst the furor, Counselor Zorgax rose, his scaled face a mask of feigned concern. "While I appreciate Zaxthar's quaint perspective, We must face reality. The human food supply chain is unreliable and prone to manipulation. For the safety and stability of our economies, centralized control is necessary. Cook's eyes narrowed as he watched Zorgax speak. Something about the counselor's carefully chosen words set off alarm bells in his mind. Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors exploded inward. Masked figures swarmed into the room, their weapons trained on Zaxthar and the council members. "Death to the corruptors of culture," one of the attackers shouted, his voice distorted by his mask. Chaos erupted. Cook grabbed Zaxthar's arm, pulling him down behind the podium as energy blasts scorched the air above them. "We need to move now," Cook hissed, his military training kicking in. They crawled along the floor, dodging panicked council members and debris. A stray blast caught Zaxthar's shoulder, eliciting a grunt of pain from the Hirogen. As they neared the exit, Cook noticed Zorgax slipping away through a hidden door, his face a mix of fear and satisfaction. There was no time to dwell on it. They burst out of the council chambers and into the crowded streets of Nexus Prime. Cook led them through winding alleys, his mind racing to find a safe haven. "I know someone who can help," he said between breaths. "A group called the Culinary Ambassadors. If anyone can make sense of this mess, it's them." Hours later, safely ensconced in a hidden compound, Zaxthar and Cook sat with the leaders of the Culinary Ambassadors. The group, a diverse collection of alien species, listened intently as Cook recounted the attack and his suspicions about Zorgax. "It's worse than you know," said Jinra, a blue-skinned Andorian. "We've uncovered evidence of a vast conspiracy. Zorgax is just a pawn in a much larger game." She activated a holographic display showing a complex web of shipping routes and financial transactions. "This cartel has been systematically sabotaging Earth's food production and distribution. They're determined to control the galactic culinary trade, regardless of the cost." Zaxthar leaned forward, his eyes scanning the data. "Then we must stop them, not just for the sake of human cuisine, but for the peace and stability of the entire galaxy." The ambassadors exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. "It won't be easy," Shinra warned. "We're up against a powerful and ruthless enemy." Cook's hand found Zaxthar's shoulder, squeezing it gently. "We've faced worse odds before, old friend. Where do we start?" Shinra's fingers danced over the holographic controls, zooming in on a distant space station. "Here, our intel suggests this is one of their main distribution hubs. If we can infiltrate it, we might be able to unravel their entire operation." As the group began to plan their daring mission, Zaxthar couldn't help but marvel at the strange path that had led him here. From a simple taste of pizza to the brink of an intergalactic conspiracy, the universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor as complex and surprising as human cuisine itself. The Culinary Ambassador's hidden compound hummed with activity as Zaxthar, Cook, and their newfound allies poured over holographic displays and encrypted data streams. Shinra's fingers danced across a control panel, bringing up a detailed schematic of a massive industrial complex. "Caxtron," she said, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. "Our sources indicate this is where the cartel's been intercepting Earth's food shipments." Zaxthar leaned in, his eyes narrowing as he studied the facility's layout. "It's heavily fortified. We'll need a team." Cook nodded, already scanning the room. His gaze settled on two figures huddled in the corner. A lithe, blue-skinned Zeltron with cybernetic implants snaking across her scalp, and a hulking Barabel whose scales bore the scars of countless battles. "Bryla," Cook called out, gesturing to the Zeltron, "you're our best bet for cracking their systems." The hacker grinned, her fingers twitching in anticipation. "Just point me at their firewalls, Lieutenant." Zaxthar turned to the Barabel. "Gnarsh, you worked for the cartel. We need your insider knowledge." Gnarsh's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "It will be my pleasure to make them regret their treachery." As the team geared up, Cook pulled Zaxthar aside. "You sure about this? We're walking into the lion's den." The Hirogen's eyes glinted with perseverance. "For the sake of your world's cuisine and galactic peace, we must succeed." Hours later, their stealth shuttle touched down on Caxtron's barren surface. Acrid fumes stung their nostrils as they approached the sprawling complex. Narsh led them to a maintenance hatch, his clawed hands working swiftly to bypass the security measures. Inside, they navigated a labyrinth of corridors, the walls thrumming with the pulse of massive machinery. Bryla's implants glowed faintly as she interfaced with the facility's systems, guiding them past patrols and deactivating security measures. Suddenly, a swarm of sleek silver drones rounded the corner. Zaxthar tensed, ready for combat, but Narsh hissed a warning. "Sentries! One false move and they'll alert the entire complex." Cook's mind raced. He spotted a nearby ventilation shaft and motioned for the team to follow. They squeezed into the cramped space, holding their breath as the drones passed mere inches from their hiding spot. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the central control hub. Bryla's fingers flew across holographic interfaces, her cybernetics pulsing with stolen data. "By the stars," she whispered, her voice tight with horror. "They're not just intercepting shipments. They're actively sabotaging Earth's food production." Before they could process this revelation, alarms blared throughout the facility. The doors to the control room burst open, revealing a squad of heavily armed soldiers led by a towering Voldarian, her scaled skin rippling with bioluminescent patterns. "Drelka," Gnarsh growled, recognition and fear mingling in his voice. The Voldarian assassin's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Did you really think you could infiltrate our operation so easily?" Chaos erupted. Energy blasts scorched the air as Cook and Zaxthar dove for cover. Bryla worked frantically to finish the data transfer, while Narsh engaged the enemy soldiers in close combat. Zaxthar locked eyes with Drelka, a primal challenge passing between them. Without a word, they lunged at each other, blades clashing in a deadly dance. The Hirogen's strength met the Voldarian's speed, neither able to gain the upper hand. As they fought, Cook noticed Drelka maneuvering Zaxthar towards a hidden panel in the floor. Realization struck him. A trap. He grabbed a discarded shock baton and hurled it with pinpoint accuracy, striking Drelka's hand just as she was about to activate the panel. The momentary distraction was all Zaxthar needed. He swept Drelka's legs out from under her, sending her crashing to the ground. Before she could recover, Cook was there, a nullifier cuff snapping around her wrist. "We've got the data," Bryla shouted, her implants pulsing with stolen information. "And I've left them a little surprise in their systems." They fought their way back to the shuttle, Narsh's insider knowledge proving invaluable as they navigated the facility's defenses. As they blasted off from Caxtron's surface, explosions rocked the complex behind them, Bryla's virus taking effect. In the relative safety of space, the team allowed themselves a moment of relief, but as the adrenaline faded, the weight of their discovery settled upon them. The cartel's reach was far greater than they had imagined, and the fight to save Earth's cuisine and the galaxy's stability was far from finished. Zaxthar turned to his companions, his voice grim but resolute. "We have struck a blow against our enemies, but this is only the beginning. We must take this information to the culinary ambassadors and prepare for the next phase of our mission." As their ship streaked through the star-filled void, the unlikely team of culinary crusaders steeled themselves for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that the fate of countless worlds now rested on their shoulders. The shuttle's engines hummed as Zaxthar and his team poured over the stolen data. Bryla's cybernetic implants glowed softly as she sifted through the encrypted files. "We've got something," she announced, her voice tight with urgency. "A hidden base in the Voltari belt. It's massive." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a sprawling facility carved into the heart of an asteroid. Cook leaned in, his brow furrowed. "That's no ordinary outpost," he muttered. "Look at those defenses. This has to be their headquarters." Zaxthar nodded grimly. "And likely where they're coordinating their attacks on Earth's food supply." As they approached the asteroid belt, the true scale of the operation became clear. Massive freighters drifted between the rocky debris, their holds undoubtedly filled with intercepted foodstuffs. Bryla's fingers danced across her console, her eyes widening. "It's worse than we thought. They're not just hoarding supplies. They're developing some kind of bioweapon, a pathogen designed to destroy Earth's crops." A heavy silence fell over the group. Zaxthar's mind focused, his warrior's instincts screaming for action. "We can't wait for backup. We need to strike now." Cook nodded, already formulating a plan. "Two teams. Bryla, Narsh, you'll lead a diversion on the main defenses. Draw their fire, keep them occupied. Zaxthar and I will take a strike force through their blind spots, hit the command center directly." As they suited up, Zaxthar caught Cook's eye. No words were needed. The bond forged through shared battles spoke volumes. The assault began with a series of explosions rocking the asteroid's surface. Bryla's team unleashed a barrage of weaponry, overwhelming the base's outer defenses. Alarms blared as Zaxthar and Cook's strike force slipped through the chaos, making their way deeper into the facility. They encountered resistance almost immediately. Cybernetically enhanced troops swarmed the corridors, their augmented reflexes making them formidable opponents. Zaxthar's combat skills were pushed to their limits as he fought tooth and nail, his blade a blur of motion. Cook proved equally resourceful, using the environment to their advantage. He overloaded power conduits, created impromptu barricades, and guided the team through maintenance shafts to outmaneuver their pursuers. As they neared the command bunker, the resistance intensified. Zaxthar found himself locked in combat with a towering cyborg, its strength nearly matching his own. Cook's voice crackled over the comm. "Zax, we're pinned down. We need to breach that door now." With a roar of effort, Zaxthar hurled his opponent into a control panel. Sparks flew as systems shorted out, the bunker's blast doors grinding open. They surged forward, only to freeze at the sight that greeted them. There, surrounded by a phalanx of elite guards, stood Counselor Zorgax. "Ah, our intrepid heroes," Zorgax sneered, his earlier facade of concern replaced by cold contempt. "I must admit, I'm impressed you made it this far, but your little crusade ends here." Zaxthar's eyes narrowed, years of Hirijan training coiling his muscles for action. "You've betrayed everything the Council stands for, Zorgax. Why?" The corrupt counselor's laugh was devoid of humor. "Power, of course. The Council's ideals of unity are a farce. True control comes from holding the galaxy's food supply in an iron grip." With a gesture, Zorgax's guards attacked. Zaxthar and Cook found themselves fighting back-to-back, a whirlwind of blades and energy blasts. The two friends moved in perfect synchronization, covering each other's blind spots and exploiting openings. As they battled, the asteroid shuddered. Bryla's voice crackled over the comm. "We've taken out their main defenses and comms. Reinforcements are incoming." Cook grinned, ducking under a guard's wild swing. "Hear that, Zorgax? Your little empire is crumbling." Rage contorted Zorgax's features. He lunged forward, a hidden blade springing from his sleeve. Zaxthar met the attack head-on, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. The duel that followed was a testament to both combatants' skill. Zorgax fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, while Zaxthar's movements were fueled by righteous purpose. A deafening explosion rocked the command center. Warning klaxons blared as the asteroid's structural integrity began to fail. Cook's voice cut through the chaos. "Zax, we need to go. This whole place is gonna blow." With a final devastating blow, Zaxthar disarmed Zorgax. The counselor stumbled back, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's over," Zaxthar growled, hauling Zorgax to his feet. "You'll answer for your crimes." As they raced through the crumbling facility, the sounds of battle echoed from all directions. Human and alien reinforcements had arrived, engaging the remaining cartel forces in a desperate struggle. They reached the hangar bay just as another explosion tore through the asteroid. Zaxthar shoved Zorgax into a waiting shuttle, exchanging a nod with Cook as they prepared for takeoff. As they cleared the asteroid's fragmented surface, Zaxthar allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They had struck a crippling blow against the cartel, but he knew the fight was nowhere near the end. There were still loose ends to tie up, a galaxy to set right. His gaze met Cook's, and he saw the same willpower reflected there. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, for the sake of Earth cuisine and the peace of the entire galaxy. The shuttle carrying Zaxthar, Cook and their captive counselor Zorgax docked at the sprawling space station Nexus Prime. As they disembarked, a crowd of officials and reporters swarmed around them, held at bay by a cordon of security personnel. Zaxthar's muscles ached from the battle, but he stood tall as he handed Zorgax over to waiting authorities. The corrupt counselor's eyes burned with hatred as he was led away. "This isn't over," Zorgax hissed. Cook stepped up beside Zaxthar, his uniform scorched and torn. "Actually, I think it is." In the days that followed, Zaxthar found himself thrust into the center of a galactic media frenzy. The scope of the cartel's conspiracy shocked billions across countless worlds. As the dust settled, the Hirogen warrior grappled with the weight of what they had accomplished, and the cost. He stood at a viewport gazing out at the star-filled expanse. Cook joined him, 2 steaming mugs in hand. "How are you holding up?" the human asked, offering one of the drinks. Zaxthar inhaled the rich aroma. "Earth coffee, you remembered. Hard to forget after all we've been through." They sipped in companionable silence for a moment before Zaxthar spoke. "I started this journey seeking new flavors. I never imagined it would lead to this." Cook nodded. "You've changed things, Zax. The galaxy won't be the same." A spark ignited in Zaxthar's mind. Perhaps that's not such a bad thing. Weeks later, Zaxthar stood in the gleaming kitchen of his newest creation, Fusion Prime, the first of what he hoped would be many intergalactic restaurants. Chefs from a dozen species worked in harmony, creating dishes that blended culinary traditions from across the cosmos. The restaurant's grand opening drew a diverse crowd. Zaxthar watched with pride as humans chatted with Barabels over plates of Terran-Silurian hybrid cuisine, while Voldarians and Andorians bonded over desserts that fused their respective cultures. As the night wore on, Zaxthar noticed a group of dignitaries enter. To his surprise, he recognized the culinary ambassadors, the very beings who had once doubted his mission. Ambassador Talara approached, her Vulcan features betraying a hint of what might have been approval. "It appears we underestimated you, Zaxthar. This establishment, it promotes a most fascinating form of cultural exchange." Zaxthar inclined his head. "Food has the power to bring us together, Ambassador. It always has." The success of Fusion Prime sparked a culinary revolution. Soon, similar restaurants blossomed across the galaxy. Zaxthar traveled extensively, overseeing new openings and fostering connections between disparate species. But not all welcomed this new era of culinary diplomacy. On a bustling space station in the Orion Arm, Zaxthar was negotiating plans for a new fusion restaurant when an explosion rocked the promenade. He raced to the scene, his warrior's instincts on high alert. Smoke billowed from the charred remains of a recently opened fusion cafe. As emergency responders tended to the injured, Zaxthar's keen eyes spotted a symbol etched into a nearby wall, a stylized knife and fork crossed like bones. A chill ran down his spine as he activated his comms. "Cook, we have a problem." "What's wrong?" Cook's voice crackled through the channel. Zaxthar's eyes narrowed. "It seems our mission isn't quite finished. There are those who fear what we've started, and they're willing to fight to stop it." As he surveyed the destruction, Zaxthar knew that the battle for the galaxy's culinary future and the peace it promised had only just begun. As Zaxthar surveyed the smoking ruins of the Fusion Cafe, his comm unit buzzed with an incoming transmission from Lieutenant Cook. "I've got intel on our attackers," Cook's voice crackled. "They're calling themselves the Culinarchy, extremists who believe in culinary purity. They see your fusion restaurants as a threat to their way of life." Zaxthar's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll just have to show them the error of their ways." In the days that followed, Zaxthar threw himself into fortifying his culinary empire. Human military forces and a coalition of alien allies bolstered security at existing fusion restaurants, while plans for expansion continued unabated. But Zaxthar knew that security alone wouldn't be enough. He needed to win hearts and minds across the galaxy. In a state-of-the-art studio on Nexus Prime, Zaxthar stood before a hovering camera drone, his voice clear and passionate as he addressed viewers across countless worlds. "Today, we're going to create something truly special," he began, gesturing to an array of exotic ingredients spread before him. We'll combine Terran bell peppers, Andorian frost berries, and Vulcan plomeek to create a dish that honors the unique flavors of each world while forming something entirely new. As Zaxathar's skilled hands deftly prepared the dish, he wove in stories of each ingredient's cultural significance. The camera panned to show a diverse team of chefs working in harmony, their movements a culinary ballet. This isn't just about food, Zaxthar concluded, presenting the finished dish. It's about bringing people together, fostering understanding between species that might otherwise never interact. The video series went supernova, capturing the imagination of billions. Soon, Zaxthar's inbox overflowed with messages from young beings across the galaxy, eager to experience fusion cuisine firsthand. At the grand opening of his newest restaurant on Rigel 7, Zaxathar watched with pride as a Tellarite trader shared a table with a Cation family, all of them savoring a complex dish that blended flavors from their respective homeworlds. "This is what it's all about," Zaxathar murmured to Cook, who stood beside him. "Breaking down barriers, one meal at a time." Cook nodded, but his expression was grave. "We've got a situation, Zax. Our intelligence network has uncovered something big. The Culinarchy, they're not just bombing restaurants anymore." Zaxthar's blood ran cold as Cook briefed him on the bioweapon threat. The stakes had just risen exponentially. "We need to move fast," Zaxthar growled. "Assemble a strike team. We're going after this Malkara before it's too late." The mission to infiltrate Malkara's hidden facility pushed Zaxthar and his team to their limits. They fought their way through automated defenses and fanatical Culinarchy guards, inching closer to their target. In the heart of the complex, they found Malkara hunched over a glowing containment unit. The xenobiologist spun to face them, eyes wild with fervor. "You're too late," Malkara cackled. "My creation will purge the galaxy of your culinary abominations." What happened next unfolded in a blur of motion. Malkara lunged for the release mechanism. Zaxthar surged forward, but Narsh was faster. The loyal alien hurled himself at Malkara, tackling the scientist away from the controls. "No!" Zaxthar roared as he saw Narsh and Malkara tumble into a field of shimmering energy, some kind of protective barrier for the lab's most dangerous elements. Gnarsh's eyes met Zaxthar's one last time, filled with dedication and something else. Peace. Then both Narsh and Malkara dissolved into nothingness. The team secured the bioweapon samples and destroyed the facility, but the victory felt hollow. Back on their ship, Zaxathar stood before his assembled allies, his voice thick with emotion. "Narsh gave his life to save countless others," he began. "We cannot let his sacrifice be in vain. The Culinarchy's hatred runs deeper than we imagined, but so does our perseverance. It's time to take this fight to the galactic stage." Days later, Zaxthar found himself addressing the hastily convened emergency summit. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the vast chamber, their faces a kaleidoscope of alien features united by shared concern. "We stand at a crossroads," Zaxthar declared, his words broadcast across the stars. "The Culinarchy would have us retreat into isolation, fearing the unknown. But I've seen firsthand the power of breaking bread together, of sharing our culinary heritage. It opens minds, builds bridges, and yes, creates peace." As Zaxthar continued his impassioned speech, he could see the impact of his words rippling through the assembly. Some nodded in agreement, while others whispered urgently to their aides. The debate that would follow promised to be fierce, but Zaxthar knew this was just the beginning. Outside the summit chamber, Cook approached with a datapad in hand. "We've got movement on multiple fronts," he reported. "Some hardliners are pushing for military action against suspected Culinarchy strongholds. Meanwhile, we're seeing a surge of support for your interstellar culinary exchange initiative." Zaxathar nodded grimly. The next few days would be crucial in shaping the galaxy's response to the Culinarchy threat. As he prepared to re-enter the chamber and continue negotiations, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only just beginning. As Zaxthar re-entered the chamber, the air crackled with tension. He strode to the central podium, his steps echoing in the hushed silence. The assembled delegates leaned forward, their varied features illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays. "Esteemed representatives," Zaxthar began, his voice steady, I come before you with grave news. He activated a data crystal, projecting a series of complex molecular diagrams above the assembly. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as Zaxthar explained the devastating potential of the Kulinarchy's bioweapon. This pathogen targets the very foundation of our galactic food supply, he continued, zooming in on a particularly virulent strain. Left unchecked, it could bring about widespread famine on an unprecedented scale. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted questions and demands, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of alien languages. Zaxthar raised a hand, waiting for quiet to descend once more. We have lost good beings to this threat, he said, his thoughts turning to Ganarsh's sacrifice. But we have also gained allies. Together, we can put an end to this madness. As Zaxthar laid out his plan for a joint military strike, he saw drive harden in the eyes of key leaders. The Andorian ambassador nodded grimly, while the Tellarite representative pounded his fist in approval. Within hours, a coalition force was assembled. Zaxthar found himself aboard a Hirogen warship, surrounded by a diverse team of elite commandos. As they prepared for the orbital drop onto Zyraxis, Lieutenant Cook approached, his face set in grim lines. Atmospheric readings are coming in, Cook reported, handing Zaxthar a datapad. It's even worse than we thought. Zaxthar studied the swirling toxic clouds that blanketed the rogue planet. Then we'd better make sure our gear is airtight. The drop pods screamed through Zyrax's corrosive atmosphere, weaving through a hail of anti-aircraft fire. Zaxthar's muscles tensed as his pod slammed into the planet's surface, the impact reverberating through his bones. He emerged into a hellscape of jagged rock formations and swirling, poisonous mists. The specialized combat suit hugged his body, its systems working overtime to keep the lethal environment at bay. Form up, Zaxthar commanded over the comm channel. We move fast and quiet. The strike team advanced through winding canyons, their sensors alert for any sign of Kulinarchy forces. The silence was broken by a sudden burst of weapon fire. Zaxthar dove for cover as energy bolts seared the air around him. Ambush! Cook shouted, returning fire with precision. Zaxthar caught glimpses of their attackers, Kulinarchy zealots in environmental suits, their faces hidden behind opaque visors. The battle was fierce but brief, the coalition's superior training quickly overwhelming the extremists. As the last enemy fell, an inhuman screech echoed through the canyon. Zaxthar spun to see a nightmarish creature lunge from the shadows. Its body was a twisted amalgamation of scales and tentacles, but its head bore an uncanny resemblance to... Is that a cucumber? Cook exclaimed, narrowly dodging the beast's slashing claws. The creature's regenerative abilities became apparent as energy weapons seemed to have little lasting effect. Zaxthar watched in horror as severed limbs regrew before his eyes. Fall back, he ordered, leading the team to higher ground. Cook's quick thinking saved them. He spotted a rock formation teetering on the canyon's edge and directed concentrated fire to bring it down. The avalanche buried the abomination, buying them precious time to regroup and push forward. As they neared the bioweapons facility, the resistance intensified. Zaxthar's muscles burned with exertion as they fought their way through waves of Kulinarchy defenders and more grotesque hybrids. Finally, they breached the outer defenses. Alarms blared as Zaxthar led the charge into the heart of the complex. In a vast laboratory filled with bubbling vats and pulsing energy fields, they confronted their ultimate foe. Matron Solara stood before them, her eyes blazing with fanatical intensity. You dare bring your tainted cuisine to our pure galaxy? She snarled. Zaxthar stepped forward, his voice steady. Your crusade ends here, Solara. With a primal scream, Solara lunged at Zaxthar. Their battle became a brutal dance, each combatant pushing their skills to the limit. As they traded blows, Zaxthar caught glimpses of his team in action. Cook disabling security systems, Bryla uploading the virus that would cripple the Kulinarchy's research. A vicious strike sent Zaxthar reeling, but he used the momentum to his advantage. He swept Solara's legs from under her, pinning her to the ground as the facility's systems began to fail around them. It's over, Zaxthar declared, securing Solara's restraints as his team finished neutralizing the threat. They emerged from the crumbling facility, battered but triumphant. As Zaxthar gazed out over the toxic landscape of Xyraxis, he allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. The Culinarchy's plans had been thwarted, but he knew that the true work of building lasting peace through shared cuisine was only beginning. Zaxthar surveyed the toxic landscape of Xyraxis one final time before boarding the shuttle. As they ascended through the planet's corrosive atmosphere, a weight lifted from his shoulders. The Culinarchy's plans had been thwarted, their bioweapons neutralized. Weeks later, Zaxthar stood before a crowd of dignitaries on New Terra, the first of many colonies established to showcase interspecies cooperation through agriculture. Lush fields stretched to the horizon, a testament to what could be achieved when diverse cultures worked in harmony. "Today marks a new era," Zaxthar proclaimed, gesturing to the thriving crops around them. "One where our shared love of food brings us together rather than divides us." The assembled beings cheered, their varied voices blending into a cacophony of hope. As Zaxthar mingled with the crowd, sampling dishes that fused flavors from a dozen worlds, he allowed himself to believe that lasting peace might truly be within reach. But far across the galaxy, on the sun-scorched world of Archelon, a different gathering was taking place. General Raxir's scaled fist slammed onto the makeshift war table, sending holograms flickering. "Zaxthar and his Federation lapdogs believe they've won," he snarled to the assembled Culinarchy loyalists. "They grow complacent while we prepare to strike at the very heart of their so-called unity." Raxir activated a secure transmission, revealing schematics for Earth's orbital agricultural platforms. "Our operatives have already infiltrated key distribution hubs," he explained, a cruel smile twisting his features. "When the shipment arrives, our vengeance begins." Weeks passed, and the first signs of trouble went unnoticed. On Earth, farmers attributed withering crops to unseasonable weather patterns. In orbital greenhouses, technicians blamed malfunctioning environmental controls for yellowing leaves. By the time the truth became apparent, it was too late. Zaxthar's communicator chirped urgently, pulling him from a deep sleep. Cook's holographic form materialized, his face etched with worry. "Zax, we've got a situation," Cook reported. "Earth's facing a global crop failure. Initial reports suggest some kind of weaponized pathogen." Zaxthar's blood ran cold. "The Culinarchy?" Cook nodded grimly. "Looks like it. We're assembling a task force. How soon can you get to Earth?" Within hours, Zaxthar found himself in a high-security briefing room at Starfleet headquarters. Grim-faced admirals and scientists presented a cascade of alarming data. The blight was spreading exponentially, adapting to bypass quarantine measures faster than countermeasures could be developed. "We've traced the origin to a hijacked seedling shipment," Admiral Chen explained, her voice tight with terrifying fury. "All evidence points to Archelon as the staging ground." Zaxthar's mind raced. "Raxir," he growled. "It has to be." The plan came together swiftly. A small, elite team would infiltrate Archelon, gathering intelligence and, if possible, retrieving samples of the original pathogen to aid in developing a cure. As their stealth shuttle broke Archelon's atmosphere, Zaxthar turned to Cook. "Just like old times," he said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Cook nodded, checking his gear one last time. "Let's finish this." They touched down in a remote canyon, the shuttle's adaptive camouflage blending seamlessly with the rust-colored rocks. Sensors swept the area, detecting faint energy signatures several kilometers to the east. The team moved swiftly through the harsh terrain, their steps muffled by the howling desert winds. As they crested a final dune, Raxir's hidden base came into view, a sprawling complex of prefab structures half buried in the sand. "There," Cook whispered, indicating a heavily guarded building near the center of the camp. "That's got to be where they're keeping the pathogen samples." Zaxthar nodded, formulating a plan. But before he could speak, a shout rang out. They'd been spotted. Plasma bolts seared the air around them as Raxir's forces swarmed from hidden bunkers. Zaxthar and Cook dove for cover, returning fire with practiced precision. "We need to reach that lab," Zaxthar shouted over the din of battle. Cook's eyes met his, a familiar perseverance burning within them. "I'll draw their fire. You make a run for it." Before Zaxthar could protest, Cook was moving, laying down suppressing fire as he charged towards a cluster of enemy troops. Zaxthar seized the opening, sprinting towards the lab building. He was mere meters from the entrance when he heard Cook cry out in pain. Zaxthar spun, his heart dropping as he saw his friend fall, struck by multiple plasma bolts. Time seemed to slow as Zaxthar took in the scene. Cook sprawled motionless on the sand. Raxir, emerging from the lab with a containment unit clutched to his chest. A squad of heavily armed troops converging on Zaxthar's position. In that moment, Zaxthar made a choice that would haunt him for years to come. With a roar of anguish, he charged towards Raxir, determined to end this threat once and for all.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.